Welcome to Lawline with your host, Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman is a distinguished trial attorney, author, and lecturer. Each week, Lawline will bring you the most knowledgeable experts in the field of law today. And now, we introduce our guests and our host, Alan Schnorman.
Welcome to Lawline. Going through a divorce is traumatic enough on its own and has been likened to a combat experience. So with that in mind, the courts are experimenting with alternative dispute resolution as a means to help settle matrimonial cases. We'll look at that program with our guest, the Honorable Phyllis Gangle-Jacob, a Supreme Court Justice who sat in the matrimonial part for 6 years, and Nina Katzander, who participated in the matrimonial alternative dispute resolution program during her own divorce. Hello, Judge Gangle-Jacob.
Good evening. How are you?
Okay.
Hi.
What is this alternative dispute resolution for matrimonial cases, and how is it helping in New York County?
Well, in Manhattan, we have a program that's been going for 2 years. It's free for the asking, but you must ask for it or you must remind the judge to assign you to it. And what it is a remarkable program because you have a lawyer. Your spouse has a lawyer. You're represented at all times. You're never alone. But there will be a neutral evaluator who is a lawyer who has been practicing for a minimum of 10 years with at least 7 years experience in matrimonial law, who goes through special court training in ethics and methodology and substantive law, and that neutral will meet with you in his or her office free of charge. You and your spouse and your respective attorneys, they'll meet with you free of charge for as many hours as it reasonably takes to iron out a settlement.
So that's the sole purpose, is resolution and bringing to a conclusion.
Yes, but it's resolution. It's resolution under the light of the law. It's not, the point of this program is not just to have a settlement. It's supposed to be a fair settlement and a just settlement, and supposed to represent what a person is entitled to under the law.
Under the dispute resolution, you cover, obviously, the finances. Do you cover equitable distribution, dividing of the assets?
Absolutely.
Do you cover other non-financial terms, such as...
custody and visitation.
Yes?
Whether you sell the house, whether you buy a house, your landlord-tenant problems.
Whether one spouse keeps the house and the other spouse doesn't, or something like that.
Exactly. Every
And how
aspect.
long can this go on for?
It can go on for, obviously, each of these parties is represented by an attorney. So each of them continues the process with their attorney after they leave. But our neutral evaluators, who are some of the most famous and costly lawyers in the city, are doing this on a volunteer basis, and they're committed to spend as much time as is reasonably necessary to complete this. Now, sometimes you might go just for, as an example, if a case requires a lot of discovery in order to determine what the assets are. You may not be able to come to terms about discovery, and making motions before the judge is very expensive. So you might see the neutral initially to work out a discovery schedule, thereafter, after discovery is completed, to work on other things.
I just saw a show on television, and it was a takeoff on one of these matrimonial parts, and there, what was interesting about this show, the parties met to settle the case in the lawyer's office, and the parties were only interested, not in financial, but in hurting and taking the toll on the other party, on the other spouse, getting back for all those years of aggravation. It had nothing to do with money.
Well, when I went to law school many moons ago, I had a professor in domestic relations course who always said, you'll never settle a case, never settle it until you reach that point called satisfaction. And I admit that sometimes people are not ready for settlement. Sometimes there are a lot of raw, open wounds. And sometimes they need a lot of encouragement and counseling. And every experienced matrimonial lawyer who acts as a neutral knows that as well. And they are there to meet the situation.
So sometimes the best evaluator, the best neutral person, if a case isn't ready to be settled, and if the parties aren't really ready to be reasonable and logical, the case can't be settled, at least
I
at
would
that
say
stage.
that that's true. But let's remember that they are in court, that they're each represented by a lawyer, that they have made their peace with going through the court system more or less, and that they're ready. Most of them are ready because the alternatives, people are pretty sophisticated nowadays. It's not like once upon a time when the termination of a marriage seemed like the worst failure in the world, where people felt shunned and scorned. I don't mean that people are not hurt today. They're miserably hurt. And the left behind spouse.
It's not that public.
Yes. And there's the leftover life to live, you know, the left behind spouse. But if you're going to find an environment in which some fair arrangement can be worked out, a just arrangement, then this is it. And frequently, a just financial arrangement will heal a lot of open wounds.
Now, Nina, you're not a lawyer, right?
Not a lawyer.
Okay. You had a matrimonial case right here.
That's right.
And right from the beginning, may I ask you personal questions about it, if I may?
Sure.
Was it an amicable matrimonial case right from the beginning?
I'm not sure that you could ever say that any divorce could be 100% amicable. I think we were both committed to doing the best we could possibly do because we have two small children.
Okay.
And we didn't want it to really uproot their lives any more than it had to. But there were definite disagreements about certain aspects of the divorce.
And I assume those were financial?
Yeah, they were financial mostly.
And of course, you heard what I said. I'm sure both of you were hurt on different areas because of the marriage not working out.
Absolutely, and if you had told me that sort of 3 hours after going and seeing this neutral evaluator that we would come to terms and have an agreement, I would have laughed in your face.
And tell me, share with me, why did you feel that?
Why did I feel that beforehand? Because I felt just what you said earlier. I felt like we were both had our heels firmly dug in about what we believed to be the right course to take, and there just didn't seem to be any middle ground. And we had two very wonderful attorneys, I thought, representing us, but they were each sort of in our corner. And
Of course, that's what the attorney is there for, to represent your interests.
Exactly. And I just didn't see giving over, you know, the degree that he wanted me to on particularly the financial matters. And I think the idea of going to somebody who was neutral, kind of like a judge but not being a judge, meant that, you know, we didn't eventually have to go to court. And if it worked out, we had nothing really to lose. But I didn't see exactly how he was going to be able to manage it.
Because at least prior to going to this neutral evaluator, your positions were fairly
Very
set.
stuck.
You knew
Very
his
stuck.
position,
That's right.
and certainly he knew your position.
That's it.
And it didn't appear to be
That's
coming
it.
to any type of resolution.
No.
Okay. Was it finished in one session, or was there some magic that went on?
I don't think he
How
used
long
fairy
did-
dust, but it was finished in one session, and I think that what he said was he was very decisive about what he thought would happen when we came into court. He was a very experienced lawyer, and he said, this is this is what I think is going to happen, and you can take my advice or leave it, but this is what I would recommend.
So he's actually saying, is, listen, if I was the judge on this case, this is how I will
Exactly.
rule. You can go through the whole procedure. You want to
Exactly.
go on 2 or 3 years with motions and fighting and legal fees and depleting the marital estate, go ahead and do it.
Absolutely.
But I'm telling you what the resolution's going to be.
That's right. And when he said that, you know, we could have kept our heels in and gone through the process, but really, what's the point at that point? At some point, you're going to have to accept what a judge says. So, you know, we were realistic about it, and I think it's really been helpful in our relationship as well as, you know, dealing with our children.
I like that. So in other words, your relationship now with your former husband,
Yeah.
because of the children, how would you categorize that relationship?
I think it's fairly friendly. I mean, we talk on the phone probably at least once a week. I mean, he lives 2 blocks from me. He sees the children, you know, very regularly. And, you know, I still don't agree with a lot of, you know, his lifestyle, et cetera, his choices. But I realize I'm never going to agree with that. But he's our children's father.
Do you think it would have been any different had the matrimonial matter dragged on for years?
I know so many people who are going through that. And in fact, my daughter has a friend who, I joke, she has visitation with me every other week and with my former husband every other week because her parents can't get along, so she'd rather be at our houses.
That's a little unique.
Yeah, it is a little unique, but I mean, they're still fighting over custody, which is horrible.
Judge, what's your advice to couples such as Nina and her husband now? If they're sitting out there watching this show, and they're also into 1, 2, or 3 years of this arduous matrimonial matter, and this doesn't only apply here in New York City, but I know you want to do this nationwide.
Well, I'd say this to people who are into 1, 2, or 3 years, and also people who have just begun the process of getting a divorce. Yes, we have a program in place in Manhattan, in what we call New York County. We're starting programs. They'll be available very soon in the other counties of New York City and New York State. And more important, we are hearing from people all over the country, judges, who ask us to send them a copy of the protocol because programs such as this are going to be instituted in many places in the country. What I do have to caution against, you know, I consider myself a rather strong sister, not a weak sister, on the question of each party getting what they're entitled to under the law. And so what I must and what I have always cautioned against is going to a mediator without a lawyer. You must have your lawyer with you.
And they do have mediation services. I've seen them advertised.
They're in the telephone books, they're in the churches, they're in the schools, they're on signposts, they're every place they can be. Some of them are social workers, some of them are neither social workers nor lawyers. Even if they're lawyer mediators, they're not acting
So it's your
as a
advice,
lawyer.
do not go to these, what they say, independent mediation services because you're not represented.
Certainly do not go to any service where you don't have independent counsel there and present with you in the process. Now, there are some mediators who think, even lawyer mediators, who don't want you ever to see a lawyer. There are some who think you should come to an agreement and then take your agreement to your lawyer. Then when the lawyer looks over the agreement and says, well, what about A and C and B2? That lawyer becomes the demon, the deal breaker. They really get very, very angry about the deal breaker lawyer. So have your lawyer with you. Have an experienced, I think our Court Next program, which I hope is going to spread like wildfire over the United States, is the best because you have experienced lawyers and it's free of charge. But if you're going to go out to private mediation, make sure, or alternate dispute resolution of any kind, be certain that the neutral is an experienced person who knows the law and that your lawyer's there and present.
We have to take a break now, but right after the break, Nina, I'm going to ask you how you found your good lawyer and what advice we can give other people. This is Alan Schnorman. You're watching Lawline. Stay with us.
Why would anybody give someone they don't know a gift? They do it because this gift saves lives. And the need for it is desperate. We need over 20,000 people to give this precious gift every day. Please give blood. There's a life to be saved right now. Call the American Red Cross at 1-800-GIVE-LIFE.
While walking in a toy store the day before today, I overheard a crayon box with many things to say. I don't like red, said yellow, and green said, nor do I. And no one here likes orange, but no one knows just why. Well, I bought that box of crayons and took it home with me and drew with all the colors so the crayons could all see that each of us is special and everyone's unique. But it's when we get together that the picture is complete.
Hello, you're watching Lawline. We're talking about alternative dispute resolution in matrimonial cases. It's the field of the future nationwide. With us is Judge Phyllis Gangle-Jacob, who is instituting this, not only here in New York, but also trying to get it nationwide. Also, we have Nina Katzander. Nina is a person, a divorcee, who went through the program and obviously liked it very much. Nina, you were successful in going through the program. You liked the program, but you know, much what we're saying is about the lawyers.
Right.
Now, everybody wants to know, if I don't know a matrimonial lawyer, how you went out and found a good lawyer.
Well, I was very lucky. I had a friend of the family who is a lawyer who works, I think, as a clerk in judges' chambers in family law. And so I asked her, and she was somebody I'd known a long time. But I would have gone to a friend. I mean, that would.
Did you interview more than one lawyer?
No. I interviewed this lawyer. I clicked with her. I thought she was, her name is Phyllis Solomon. She's a very well-respected lawyer in New York, and I thought she would do a good job for me.
And obviously she did.
I was very happy with her, and I was also happy with my former husband's attorney. So, and he also, I know, asked a friend for reference.
How long
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth
is probably one of the best ways to find a compatible matrimonial lawyer. But you know, just going back to our neutral evaluation program for 1 minute, you might wonder how the neutral is selected.
That's what I thought he was asking.
And this is kind of important because, as an example, in Manhattan, we have a roster of 130 volunteer neutrals. And the 2 lawyers, one for each party, chooses from that roster. And the roster contains a lot of information about the neutral. But generally speaking, experienced matrimonial lawyers know these people.
That's very interesting because some neutral evaluators would be better for other type of cases than your particular case.
That's
And
correct.
some are just better, maybe because one is more financially based and one may be more custody based.
That's correct. And the other thing that's very good, in the selection of the neutral, you can be certain that that neutral does not have a conflict of interest. And the neutral, in our program, the neutral actually has to sign a statement saying there's no conflict of interest. So that if, as an example, Nina's school teacher, Nina's child's school teacher, was the cousin of the neutral, then it wouldn't be an appropriate neutral.
Judge, everybody really wants to know their rights. Now that I have you here, if a person is getting divorced, and I know New York is an equitable distribution state, but not too many people understand what equitable distribution is. What is it?
Well, up until, I would say, 1966, if I recall correctly, maybe it's 1976. I can't remember. 1976. Definitely 1976
Yes.
or 1978.
A long time ago.
A long time ago. In New York State, if you owned property in your name, it was yours.
The husband. Okay.
If
What's
I
mine
owned
is mine.
property in my name, it was mine.
So if we got divorced, I would keep my houses and say thank you very much.
Yes, and that could be true if it was the house that we acquired together over 35
But it was
years
in
of
my
marriage.
name. My name,
That's
I keep it.
correct.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Okay. And then?
And now we have what's considered a fair division of marital property. Marital property is property that was acquired from the date of the marriage to the date a summons is served in an action for divorce. Any earnings on that property, any increments to that property, any accelerated value of that property that occurs over that period of time. And then based on a statute, we have 10 factors that a judge or that you or that a neutral considers in what is a fair division of that property. In New York State, we're not a community property state.
Which
it's
means
not
half and half.
50-50.
Community property, half and half.
It's not 50-50.
We're also seeing in California. Half and half.
50-50 is not mandated, but 50-50 is not a bad place to begin, I can tell you.
Interesting.
But that's not what that may be the end result in New York State. But if you look at the factors, they are the age of the parties, the health of the parties, how the property was accumulated, the contribution of each party to the accumulation of the property. I haven't looked at this list for so long, and I didn't know you were going to ask me this question, but there are 10 factors, including an open factor, any other factor which should be considered in dividing this property fairly and equitably between the parties.
Judge, what about a law practice or a doctor's practice?
Has to be evaluated.
You mean,
Or even a law license, I
what if
might add.
what if I can't sell my law practice? Is my wife entitled to part of it?
Yes.
But it may have no value because
It
I can't
has.
sell it.
Well, we'll hear what the neutral evaluator says about whether it has a value or not. And of course, nowadays you can sell your practice. That law has changed.
I see.
But
Is my wife listening?
But even before, when lawyers had no right to sell their practice, if, as an example, you had a personal injury tort practice and you had 300 cases that were pending in your office, and there was an ability to evaluate each of those cases by an expert and try to determine what ultimately your share of the proceeds would be, less your cost of operating your office and so forth and so on. That's the value of
I'm not going to get
practice.
divorced. Nina, let me ask you this.
Can I just say one
Yes,
other
go
thing
ahead.
about that?
Go
Is
ahead.
that something that surprised me when I got a divorce was it wasn't only equitable distribution of property, it was also equitable distribution of debt that had been accrued in the marriage, which is something that people
That's very
who pay all
interesting.
their bills maybe don't know. But one of my personal things was that my former husband had accrued a lot of debt unbeknownst to me, and I was liable for it.
And did you eventually have to share in that?
That was part of what we talked about with the neutral evaluator, yeah. I certainly did.
So it's not a matter of, not only was there a division of assets,
Right.
but there was a division of liabilities,
That's true.
and you very well had a position that some of those liabilities were not really yours.
That's right.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when people consider a divorce, Many people say they're sitting in their living rooms now, says, you know, the marriage really isn't working out. But do I want to go through a divorce? Do I want to put the children through it? Do I want to go through years of fighting? What's your advice to them?
No. I mean, my advice would be if you're just uncomfortable, work on getting comfortable. I mean, lots of people do it successfully. I'm all for people working out their marriages. I think it ends when you're living with a stranger who you don't know, can't know, is somebody just completely different than you thought, that you really can't live with day after day.
So if it's just a matter of you feel that, well, you know, I'm out of love. I just don't have that sparkle I had 10 years ago.
Well, I think that's very natural, don't you? Any long-term relationship. My husband and I were together for 16 years, and I didn't expect there to be that sparkle forever and ever. But I did have certain other expectations that just weren't being met. So for me, that was the end of the marriage.
George, what's your advice on a personal level to people who are watching the show and perhaps contemplating a divorce?
Well, I feel much as Nina does. I think if there's a way to work through your problems, that's priority one. But when all is lost, as a last resort, if you're proceeding to a divorce, try to get competent counsel and pray that your spouse does the same. Mm-hmm. It is not a help to you if your spouse does not have competent counsel. Two realistic, knowledgeable counsel on each side, who then ask for the neutral evaluation program. By the way, I have to point this out because there are many lawyers, not just litigants, but many lawyers who don't know that this free service is available in our courts today.
And in fact, it was our lawyers who suggested it to us.
They suggested it,
yes.
And they requested it. But some lawyers don't know it exists. And because it's relatively new and it's surprising, 130 lawyers are volunteering their time.
How is the
to
success?
help.
Have you evaluated the success rate?
Yes. We've had approximately 200 cases come through, and we have I think it's 58 or 59% have been resolved. Now, that does not mean that the other 40% have not been assisted by the process. Maybe not all of them have. Maybe there's not a complete resolution, but there are certain issues that resolve. It's not the whole case, and that's a help too.
What about on custody? Do you find that's more difficult to resolve by the neutral evaluator?
I think probably people are more willing actually to give in on custody.
Okay, so sometimes custody is just used regarding finances.
Just the opposite. Yeah, yes, that's exactly true. That the custody issue is raised to try to shave on the finances.
Judge Phyllis Gangle-Jacob, thank you very much for appearing one more time on Law Line. And it's Nina Katzander, thank you for coming and sharing with us your experience.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I hope that if anybody who's watching wants to go into the process, they'll contact me.
And this is Alan Schnorman, your host, and thank you for watching Law Line.
You have been watching Law Line with your host, New York trial attorney Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman will be back with you next week at the same time. If you have any questions about this week's program, please write to Law Line, 63 Wall Street, New York, New York, 10005, or call area code 212-432-9111.